everybody out this morning. We've got mostly a full house. We've got kind of our Auburn delegation that usually sits over here. Didn't show up today, but we can understand that. I think you Alabama people should have been paying it forward today to hope you get in the Final Four. I think you should. That helps in it, but at any rate. Of course, Walt, we have such a wonderful town. You know, you can't have somebody like Kilbride over here being the head of the chamber and it not be a great town. So, Bill, congratulations on your service. Of course, Mr. Kilbride and I have plenty of opportunity to talk about how we know that the source of any good idea we've had comes from who sits next to us. Is that about right, Bill? So, we're glad to have visitors with us today. We welcome you to our rowdy crew. Hope you'll come back. I'm disappointed that wasn't a $100 bill. I mean, that's just amazing. As much as you have gone on about Georgia all year long, sat there and enjoyed what happened last night. That's like Christmas coming early. Of course, you know, we'll be going to no bowls this year. We can't even get a coach. I love the Twitter or whatever it was that went around this week that was attributed to Lane Kiffin, that he had been poked at enough by UT fans, and he supposedly sent around this photograph that had been photoshopped of somebody in a UT outfit, orange with a white tee and all that, and Kim Jong-un's head on it. And it said even he would come to Tennessee. So at any rate, I wish they'd have just gone ahead and appointed Fulmer coach. That'd have been fine with me. You know, we hadn't beaten a team in the top 10, not even one, since Fulmer left. And Fulmer left in a season in which he won 9 football games. That's amazing. So at any rate, that's a story for another day. I know what I want to say. I may have a problem on Thursday night. I've got a little conversation going on with a company in Colorado that insists that they had scheduled me a year ago on the 7th, and I'm insisting it was on the 14th. They're insisting that they've rented a place, and unless they can change it around, they're going to expect me to be there. So at any rate, I may be hustling back from Colorado. That may be a push. I have got my son to tentatively agree to stand in for me, so that'd be better anyway. So at any rate, I hope that works out, but if it doesn't, then I don't think it'll be my bad, but it'll be something that'll just be one of those things, I guess. So at any rate, we'll look forward to Thursday night with the hope that we'll get to be with you and hope that you'll get to be with each other, which is even more. This is the Sunday school lesson for our next Sunday in Advent. I hope this will give us all a little bit to think about. It does me. I've been in this business of studying the Bible for a very, very long time now. Even in my earliest experiences in Southern Baptist Sunday school classes and vacation Bible schools. In the church that I went to, that was like seminary for kids. Jimmy Johnson, who owned the local furniture store, was my teacher one time. Pat Love, who owned the local bank, was my teacher one time. Harold Powers, who was the principal at one of the main grammar schools, was my teacher one time. And most of my other teachers were regular school teachers during the week. They took their religion really seriously, and they thought it was very, very important to teach kids about the Bible. And so that was never a casual activity. And I would have to admit that I was usually the first one to raise my hand to ask a question, but you could have figured that out. Therefore, it's really, really nice for me whenever I read something or somebody says something that's kind of a new insight or something that I've not exactly thought about in that way before. Or maybe it's even a little surprising or very nice when your brain kind of comes together in some way and you experience a little of that inspiration that's hanging out there sometimes. But it's really nice when you find something that 10 lines into reading it, it's not kind of the same old, same old. And so Bill Aaron over here a few weeks ago gave me a book about the parables, written by a woman named Amy Jill Levine, who self-describes herself as a Yankee feminist Jew. And I thought, well, now that'd be an interesting kind of person to look and see what they've got to say about the parables, which interest me, as you know, very, very much. And I have just been intrigued by the way that that book goes so deep sometimes, and the way that she'll just say something in an offhanded way that will get you thinking about things that you've never thought about before. And so, Bill, thank you for that book. That's something that I've been using a lot over Christmas. Early on in her book, Amy Jill Levine gives attention to the parable of the lost sheep and the parable of the lost coin and the prodigal son parable, which, to keep things kind of consistent, she calls the parable of the lost son. I have dealt with these parables many times in the things that I have written, and so what I found her saying about those parables gave me affirmation or gave me an area where I was in very much agreement with what she had to say. What she first says about those parables is what you and I have probably talked about before and what you've heard a million times, and that is that the parables are about the efforts that we need to take to try to go after those people that are lost, or to try to help those people that have kind of gotten off of the right path in life. And boy, that's the way I learned it. I mean, in the church that I grew up in, every emphasis was directed it toward somehow going out and finding people that were lost. That's the reason we had 2 10-day revivals every year. That's the reason why I could sing from memory every verse of Just As I Am. That's the reason why we would have sometimes altar calls that would go on for 20 minutes at the end of the service, and if someone actually got saved that had been lost, I mean, everybody went away rejoicing about that. And so when I first looked at those parables, then everything that I thought about them was that these are parables about the efforts that we ought to take to get to those people that are lost. Now, I'll be honest with you, when I was even a little boy looking at those parables, I did have some questions. And so I heard that parable about the guy that had 100 sheep and lost one of them and went off into the wilderness at night looking for it. The thought that crossed my mind was, what about those other 99 that had been left unguarded? In my logic, it didn't make much sense to leave the 99 unattended and to go off looking for the one that might wander back in on its own at some point. And so I was capable early on of asking questions. I also remember, what if those parables about the lost sheep and the lost son, the prodigal, what if they were kind of talking about the same people, and all of a sudden that guy goes out and finds that sheep, but then when his son gets back, he offers that sheep up as something to eat at the festival that he picked. That sheep might have been better off just staying lost. Now I realize that the story of the prodigal says that he got the grain-fed calf and offered it up, but I'm sure they had to have lamb chops or mutton or something for the people that didn't like red meat. And so, I'm all the time asking questions about these things. But Levine also talks about how in the history of the church, that the church has had an interesting way of framing the way that we feel about sections of the Bible and determining what's important. She draws attention, just in an offhanded way almost, to the little statements that come at the top of pages in the Bible. You've seen those that kind of tell us what's important on that page in the Bible. And if you go back through a bunch of Bibles that are laying around your house, you'll find up there at the top, lost sheep, lost coin, prodigal son, lost son. And so she says, you know, the way that the church across the years has framed it has been exactly in line with what we're talking about. I even had a preacher in our church when I was growing up who talked about how every word in the Bible was divinely inspired. Well, of course he said that. He was a Baptist preacher. And then he talked about how not only was the Bible inspired, but even those little headings that were put up there, they were divinely inspired too. And so the whole emphasis was on lost coin, lost sheep, lost son. And then this woman who writes this book, again, just in a little offhanded remark, says that maybe we have titled these parables in the wrong way. Maybe we should have entitled these parables, The Woman Who Lost Her Coin, The Shepherd Who Lost His Sheep, The Man Who Lost His Son. I never thought about it like that, Bill. But that's an interesting kind of idea, because in fact there's every likelihood that that sheep didn't lose itself. That shepherd may have had so many sheep to look for on his plate and take care of in his responsibility that maybe one just got overlooked. Or maybe there's the possibility that the shepherd left the gate open and the sheep got out. Or maybe there was a place in the fence that he'd been planning to fix and he just never got around to it. And so there's every plausibility that it could have been the shepherd who lost his sheep. And the woman, that coin didn't lose itself. That coin wasn't laying there on the table and suddenly deciding that if volitionally will decide, I believe I'll get lost right now. Clearly in that particular parable, the woman loses the coin. It's not the coin that loses itself. And then finally, if we take her cue, there's every possibility that that man, that father, may have done some things that drove that younger boy away. Or there's every possibility that he may have shown some favoritism or leveled some criticism at that younger son that got that younger son out the door as soon as he could get out the door. I even thought in the back of my mind it could be that that great celebration is not so much because this lost boy has come back, but because his coming back may have let the father off the hook just a little bit. It may be that not only did that give the boy a second chance, it may have given the father a second chance. And so I loved it when she threw out that idea of the woman that lost the money, the shepherd that lost the sheep, the boy, the father that lost the boy. That gives all kinds of different possibilities. Well, that's the assist that Amy Jill Levine gave me, and so now the ball's in my hand. I'm going to take it the rest of the way, or try to, okay? I have thought about that now for weeks. And I've thought about why in the world is it that we go in the direction of putting the blame on the coin and the sheep and the boy. Why have we done that? Why is it that in almost any Bible that we own, that those little maybe inspired headings say lost sheep, lost coin, lost son? Why have we been so comfortable in placing our emphasis there? I've got two possible responses to that. The first response I've got to that is kind of cynical, okay? But we're capable of that. If I wanted to be cynical about why we've given the emphasis we have to these parables, and I would say that we probably, like any story that deflects or dissipates accountability or responsibility or blame. If I wanted to be cynical about it, I would say that the stories as they presently stand and as they are presently framed allow us to kind of push accountability off to the side, push blame off to the side, and say, well, it's just like with our lives, it's got to be somebody else's fault. Or maybe the fault of a stupid sheep, or the fault of a stupid coin, or the fault of a stupid boy. It couldn't be our fault. Maybe we like stories that help us get into this frame of reference of deflecting blame. I think I can identify with that. I can remember several years ago that Phyllis had gone out and had bought an antique plate. And I don't remember that it was very expensive, but I remember that because she knew what it was and knew something of its provenance, that it was important to her. And so before we went to bed that night, she said, the grandkids are coming over tomorrow. Maybe you ought to put that plate up when you turn the lights off in a place that's safe. That's something I can handle. And so when I went downstairs to turn the lights off, I got this special place and I put it on the shelf and we went to bed. Somewhere in the middle of the night, we heard it crash. And Phyllis said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "What was that?" And I said, "Something fell." And she said, "Go check on it." And so I went downstairs, and in a few minutes after I wandered around, I knew exactly what had fallen, you see. I came back upstairs and I said, I'm really, really sorry to tell you that plate fell off the shelf. See what I'm saying? It's like the way I wanted to kind of frame that was that it was that plate's fault. The way I wanted to frame that is that somehow that plate had enough volition that in the middle of the night it didn't like our house or something and decided to create plate suicide. Can any of y'all identify with the way I'm treating that little incident? I'll bet you can. But you see what I'm trying to say? That's the lost coin, and that's the lost sheep, and that's the lost boy, that's the lost plate. And in a moment or two, thank God, Phyllis drifted off to sleep, and that was the end of the conversation. I did try to be the nice person that I am, go downstairs early the next morning, clean that smashed plate up, and at least I had something going for me. But I think we do that. I think we try to do whatever sometimes we need to defray and deflect and diminish accountability. And maybe if we want to be cynical about it, these parables have been handed down across the years to help us with that. And to kind of imply it's the sheep's fault and the coin's fault and the boy's fault. Couldn't be our fault. But then I don't like to be cynical. And so I think maybe there is a different way that maybe we can look at these parables. Maybe instead of looking at them through the lens of something that might encourage us to evade accountability, maybe we can look at these parables through the lens of generosity. And maybe that's what the Bible writers and maybe Jesus in his story was really trying to get us to. Sometimes there's a good deal of realism in generosity. You see, there's nothing that can be done about that sheep that's lost. It's lost. There's nothing about that coin can be done. It's lost. There's nothing about that boy. He's lost. And so if we play it backward to the past, then that's probably where we're going to go to blame and fault and accountability. But generosity helps us play it forward to the future. Generosity helps us play it forward to the future in a way that really, really might help. You see, I'm pretty convinced that Phyllis knew exactly the dynamics of why that plate ended up being broken. I'm pretty convinced of that. And I'm pretty convinced that she could have gone into an explanation or a tirade or whatever about how I was responsible for breaking the plate. You see what I'm saying? She's got a choice at that moment. She can play it to the past and talk about blame. She can play it to the past and talk about responsibility. She can play it to the past and not talk about a stupid plate, but maybe a stupid husband who knew that that shelf that he set it on was kind of slanted to begin with. But she didn't. In her generosity, she just kind of let it go. And that gave a chance, you see, for something that could be much more positive. Because the odds are, in the middle of the night, not being at my best, had she started blaming me and holding me accountable, I could have said to her, well, it's just a stupid old plate. That probably wouldn't have worked. Or I could have said to her, well, you're just overreacting. Any of y'all tried that line lately? And things would have gone from bad to worse to worse. But because of her generosity, I didn't just clean that mess up the next day. I went to some really significant efforts to do more. Find another plate just like that and replace it. And life went on in a better way. I think that generosity can be a profoundly powerful choice. Maybe even a gift at times. It may be the first step toward forgiving others and even an aid in helping us to forgive ourselves. Framing situations and people in a generous way can be a powerful catalyst for a positive and better outcome. Blame, you stupid shepherd, you stupid coin, you stupid sheep, almost always serves to make situations worse. Sure, there are times when holding people accountable is important, but the world we live in seems almost to race toward blame as quickly as it can. Exploring issues of accountability in a civil manner and not racing toward blame seem to be two really significant choices that we have most of the time. Christmas seems like a time when we ought to be able to talk about generosity. But I'm not talking here about the generosity that occurs to us at Christmas when we give the cab driver or the delivery person a little bit bigger tip. I'm not talking about the generosity that occurs at Christmas when we try to respond to the mailman or the UPS person or the FedEx person with something to give them at least a token of what they do for us. I'm talking about Christmas maybe being a time in which we choose to be generous and to frame people in a little better light, not blaming so quickly. I'm talking about the kind of generosity that's almost guaranteed to make a situation better. Sometimes when we frame people in a better light, they'll live up to that better light. Sometimes when we give people a bit of the benefit of the doubt, they give us a bit of the benefit of the doubt. Children need to see parents and grandparents acting in this way. Parishioners need to see clergy preaching in this way. Nations need to see leaders leading in this way. Other faiths need to see Christians loving in this way. Maybe the entire story of Christmas is about a generosity that God takes toward us, the giving of His Son, There's plenty of blame to go around, plenty of punishment that could be passed out. But God chooses at Christmas not to go in that way. Maybe Christmas and the events that we celebrate are the most powerful example that we could ever see of playing it toward the future as opposed to playing it toward the past. A 9-year-old boy in Sunday school class was asked to comment on his teacher's lesson about the lost sheep. He hadn't been paying much attention. The reason for the teacher picking him out of the question, I'm sure. At best, I think the teacher was hoping for a traditional interpretation of going to great ends to find the lost. That was the approach he had taken in the lesson. The boy, maybe less distracted than the teacher had imagined, immediately responded, "Damn stupid shepherd lost another sheep." That may not be the best way to go. Might not have been in the Sunday school class. The teacher asked for a closing prayer and quickly dismissed everyone. You see what I think is being said here? I think that sometimes we would rather go in directions of blame and criticism and put down and aggressive invective. Maybe what Christmas says is we've got the choice of going in the direction of generosity, to look at people in a brighter light, to give people the benefit of the doubt. And maybe generosity is the way that love plays it forward. Let's pray. Help us, our Father, that we might not so easily take up the habits that it seems like our world is so caught up in today, in which we see people of great influence all around us on almost every stage, moving first to blame, moving first to criticism, moving first to express that it's someone else's fault. Help us, our Father, that we might know that we always have the choice of generosity, and that you made that choice in the most profound way with your Son at Christmas. So help us when we have the opportunity to get caught up in events with people around us, that we might first ask ourselves, how can I be generous in my response? How can I be generous in my evaluation? How can I be generous in the way that I size all of this up? Help us that we might realize that backward from today that we can do very little, but forward from today we have the opportunity to do a great deal. So help us that we might always try to focus on how to make situations better, how to give situations a chance to move in a positive direction. Help us that especially at Christmas, that we may be people of great generosity, and in that way follow your example and follow your will for our lives. For we ask in Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all for coming today.
Above the highest